This week on Buffering, we will be talking with Scott Goff, marketing coordinator from Gibson Connect, and Terry Young from the Calix go-to-market success team, and talking about how Gibson made the transition to a broadband experience provider. So Scott, Tara, welcome to the podcast. I think this is your first time on Buffering, and we are happy to have you both.
Thanks. I'm super excited to be here. I feel like I'm a celebrity now.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is great.
Well, we can kind of jump right into everything here, but I do want to do a few introductions. Scott, can you tell me a little bit about yourself and your background in the industry?
Yeah, so this is all my cards on the table. This is my first telco marketing job. I spent the first little bit of my career doing nonprofit stuff, and then higher ed, which is basically nonprofits. And then now I'm in co-op marketing, which is kind of nonprofit again. So this has been kind of new and exciting. It's great to work at a place that's pretty universally loved by our subscribers. That was a nice kind of change of pace. As much as I liked working in higher ed, not everybody's super happy with every university you work at. So yeah, this has been great.
That's awesome. Well, I'm happy we could have you on the podcast, and fun and exciting is a great way to describe the industry. And Tara, I know you've got quite a bit of broadband experience as well. Let's talk about you a little bit.
So yeah, I've been in broadband a really long time, almost as long as Gabe, I think. But started at a BSP, worked at a consulting engineering firm, worked at an agency, and came to Calix about 5 years ago when they were really starting to stand up success, and they were trying to figure out what that offering was going to look like long term. And so been here ever since, and now my role is specifically go-to-market success. So how do we change how we talk to subscribers, and how do we better align that to the products and services that we're offering? So I get involved in all kinds of really awesome conversations, but also some really tough ones about how do we change, and change is super hard in this industry, as we all know. So
I love that you brought up that you've been here almost as long as Gabe, because Gabe, as of last week, 20 years, I think was the announcement. So
That's
Gabe,
true. Yeah. I have been in Calix for a long time. Much like Tara, I started my career at a BSP, and just love this industry, right? And then it's been a fun ride ever since. So
it's the best industry. We have the best customers too.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yes, we do have wonderful customers. I do have to share my favorite Tara story. There are so many. It's hard that I can even pick a favorite. But I do remember interviewing Tara, and one of the things that really impressed me when Tara did her interview is she was actually on vacation. And we were very actively pursuing her. We really wanted to get her on board. We really needed to grow our success team, because at that point, all of us were running with our hair on fire and trying to deal with like 50 accounts, and it was complete insanity. So we really, really needed Tara in so many ways. But so she's on vacation, and she had just completed a giant hike, like up and down a mountain. And she did her interview from the car, and I just couldn't believe how well she did from a car doing this interview. And I was really, really impressed with her. We got off the phone. I was like, yeah, we need to hire that person immediately. If she can do that after just going up and down, I don't know how many feet vertical. And
it was a 14,000 foot mountain in Colorado. No big deal.
I was very impressed.
Average Thursday,
Every conversation with Tara involves a mountain or a hike. And Tara, that was actually the first time we met in person, was on a mountain. So I'm not sure, what you bring to this team here, Tara, but I'm starting to catch a theme here.
Yes, every experience with me and with Calix Success is a mountaintop experience, you guys. You can take that to the branding corner and just, there you go.
It. That was perfect.
All right. Well, shifting back here a little bit, talking about Gibson a little bit, Scott, I'd love to hear your transition from an electric co-op to this broadband experience provider, and what that journey has been like for you.
Yeah, so it was a long process for us. This was the switching to the value-based offers was something that was on our radar for a while. So I've been here for almost 2 years. When I got hired on, it was something that was like, hey, we're looking at this, we're thinking about it. Now you need to think about it. And kind of fast forward to last say like last spring and summer is when we got into the throes of trying to figure this out and whether it was going to be the right fit for us and how we were going to do it. And so we, and obviously we're going to get into this a little more, but we ended up choosing not to change our packages, but change the messaging around our packages for a number of reasons. But I think it's been really good. The benefits for us kind of right out of the gate. We did see some business success with it, but I think more importantly, it's helping our members and our subscribers pick the right plans that fit them. It makes it easier to ask people questions and kind of guide them to a plan that's going to fit their needs better. And and from a marketing perspective, creating ads and targeting ads and finding, who should I target for this and what message should I deliver to them, it really puts it in a system, which is great. I mean, we have a lot of people here who help out with marketing, but generally speaking, if we're doing something on the marketing side, I'm either involved with it or doing it. And so
sounds familiar with a lot a lot of our customers, Scott.
Yeah.
Maybe not a tremendous
so being
number
able
of
to
folks.
systematize, so being able to put that stuff in a system where we can just, I don't know, it sounds kind of bad, but just like I've got this nice little square to work inside of and I know that it fits and we can kind of get this stuff done. Super helpful.
Well, I think that speaks to, and Tara, I know you've seen this, I'd love to hear your perspective on it, is the ambiguity of what service tiers existed before. And Scott, I think you struggle with a lot of that same thing. You had 2 service tiers, you had a 250 meg tier and a 1 gig tier. What does that mean to the average consumer? Tara, I know I'd love to hear your perspective on that.
Well, and even before that, how do your salespeople or your CSRs or your member services people even start to characterize that in a conversation, right? Like they don't. I work with people all the time that can't really even characterize what the difference is between, a 250 meg service and a gig service, or a gig service and a multi-gig service. Like, at what point in time are we able to build any more context around that other than, well, one's fast and one's faster and the throughput on one is X and the throughput on one is another? So I love that whole idea of taking it back and putting it in human terms. And everyone knows on our team that I am not an Apple adherent at all. So there are some members of my team.
Those are fighting words on this podcast with
I know,
Zach
I
there.
know. Some members of my team, like Zach, who are fans of the Apple. But one of the things that Steve Jobs did really well was make it so that technology was emotional and personal, and the buying experience was one that a customer felt comfortable making because they had more context around what it was they were going to purchase. And I feel like that's where these value-based offers help us on both sides of the coin, because it's giving context to the seller so that they can have those conversations, Scott, that you're talking about, and giving context to the buyer so that they feel like they've got that warm fuzzy that they bought the right thing. Because nobody likes to walk away from an engagement where you're buying something and feel like, oh man, I just got hosed. I don't feel like I got what I needed there. So
speaking of buying the right thing, Scott, can you talk to us a little bit about moving from these 250 1 gigabit per second plans into what your new offering is today?
Yeah. So I think it's probably important to highlight that our actual plans haven't changed. So we still offer a 250 and we still offer a gig. What we've done is we've changed the messaging around those plans. We've changed how we talk about them and how we present them. We did it for a couple of reasons. One, as we were going through this process, well, first of all, as you said earlier, change is hard. Co-ops are notoriously change averse, even by most people's standards. And so, we looked at this and we thought, is this really going to work? And we kind of, got into it and we saw the value of it. We saw the benefits both internally and externally. But there was still kind of this, this thing in the back of your mind that's like, well, what if this doesn't work? What if this kind of goes sideways? And it's a ton of work on our team to actually create new packages, reprovision everything. You go through the whole thing. So we thought, all right, well, let's just try it and see how it goes without changing the packages around. Let's just change the messaging around. And then, we kind of had this thing, well, we'll reevaluate it as we go along. And we're still kind of, I guess, reevaluating regularly, hey, is this still working? But so far it's worked really well, just changing that messaging around. And again, our network is really good. Um, our network guys have done an amazing job of building a super reliable network. And so what we get to do with the messaging then is just tailor, hey, the benefits of our 1 gig plan, let's explain that in terms of someone working from home. And we've got a landing page for that. Let's talk about the benefits of our plan and the fact that we provide Experience IQ and Protect IQ and the app and managed Wi-Fi. It's all included in your service. It's all included in everybody's service for both tiers. But let's highlight the benefits of that for a family on our family landing page. And then, same thing with people who game, highlight the gaming benefits. And then, again, in our area, it's a rural area. We have a lot of people that call up and just say, I want an internet. And we said, great, so for someone like that who's just calling, really, they just want a basic connection, we're putting them right on the 250. And we developed a page called Simple and Secure that really kind of highlights the simplicity, the ease, and all the help you're going to get from local people.
I love that aspect of it, Scott, and the leaning into those additional things that you all are going to deliver as part of that simple plan and approaching people in a way where technology may be a little bit scary to them. So you're approaching it in a way that is really helping them understand how you are going to help, kind of coach them through that and be that guide, right? That's going to help them through that whole process.
And I just
One
want
thing
to
you
touch
mentioned.
base.
Oh, go ahead, Tara.
Wait, Scott mentioned it, so I am going to definitely lean into it because one of my favorite things about how you positioned, and I know Gabe is a fanboy too when he start talking about buyer flow, but the landing pages are chef's kiss. Like that
Agreed.
seems like
Thanks.
such a
Thank you.
simple thing to put that out there to help people make better decisions. And again, going back to what I was saying earlier, make those decisions and feel good about them. But you're helping them through that with that buy flow and that landing page is just, it's so good and it's so easy for then you guys to turn around and digitally, pull people into the right pieces. In terms of what's a small thing, a small change that somebody could make that's not super painful, I think that is the most underrated marketing tool that people miss out on, I think.
Tara,
And
I feel like you've
going
said
beyond
this
the
to me.
website a little bit too, we talked there a little bit, Scott, about people calling in. So I want to touch on that too. What challenges did you see with your customer facing roles and kind of equipping them or preparing them to have this conversation on the family, the simple and secure, the gamer plan, as opposed to the old 250 megabit per second or 1 gigabit per second? Can you tell me how that process went?
Yeah. So I think, and again, we may touch on this a little bit later. There is a lot of great stuff about being a co-op. There's a lot of huge benefits that we get from being a co-op. I don't want to shy away from that. I definitely want to highlight that because it is a differentiator for us. But it does come like any business, right? Like it comes with its own set of challenges. For us, being a co-op means providing amazing customer service, doing everything we can to get somebody hooked up, getting them what they need. And so sales or something that might feel like sales starts feeling kind of weird. It's like, oh, we don't do that. We don't sell stuff. And so really then the conversation becomes, all right, well, we're really not selling. This isn't like hard selling. Obviously we can walk somebody through the thing when they call in and we say, hey, do you play video games at home? Yes. I play Dota 2 for 40 hours a week. Great. You need the gig plan. And they say, no, I want the 250. We're going to be like, great, that's fine. You're on the 250. No problem. So really it's a big part of it. It's just sort of helping them see that it's not necessarily sales. It's more of kind of guiding the conversation, kind of helping them find the right fit. I've heard you guys talk about in this podcast a few times, right sizing people into the right plans. And that's really what it's about. For us, we want to make sure that someone's going to have a great experience first and foremost, because that's at the end of the day, that's why we're here. We're here to take care of our subscribers and our members, and make sure they have a really good experience.
Yeah, I love that perspective. And I think it's spot on for so many of the, whether it's electric co-ops or telecommunications cooperatives or just people serving rural areas of the country, is it's wanting to make sure that, like you said, you're not putting that hard sell on people or selling something that they don't need. But this does transition to a topic that I really wanted Tara's perspective on, which is selling to the lowest common denominator. And that is something that I know you see a lot where,
Mhm.
Scott, as you kind of mentioned previously, people would, they're just, okay, well, we have this low end tier. But what I love about how these value-based offers have rolled out is it's allowed you not to sell to that lowest common denominator. And Tara, I'd love to hear your perspective and kind of your experience there.
Well, before I go down there, Scott, how long have you guys been offering broadband at Gibson? Because I think this is a really important part of that whole conversation.
Yeah, so we have been offering broadband for about 7 years. We jumped
Okay.
in when Tennessee regulations let us jump in. So
Yep, yep, okay. And I love that. So, and I see this so much, especially in companies that are relatively young, like residential broadband, residential internet, is, 25-ish years old. But companies that have started to do residential broadband of any kind in the last, what, 10 years, have really, really been leaning into, we're putting fiber in the ground, plows are running, crews are out, we just need to hook people up. And there is nothing wrong with going, from the perspective of monetization first, right? Like, especially if you're a co-op and you're talking about, your members or your owners, you really want to show that you're being fiscally responsible with, their membership dollars, right? But what I also see then is, because everybody is so heads down into let's turn up a subscriber, is they don't take time necessarily, especially in that first couple of years of a build, to think about what's the long-term experience. And we've seen it before where a BSP will say, well, we're just going to put everybody on the first plan, because that's easy. We're just going to hook you up, unless they ask for something more. And a lot of times that's driven by the CSRs or the member services reps or whatever, thinking, well, the best customer service that I can provide is to put someone on the cheapest plan and save them money. And while that's an admirable idea, sometimes what happens long term, again, as that customer matures, as they add more, capabilities to their service. They buy the 4K TV and they have, their kids all of a sudden get laptops from school and they put in cameras or, the digital fed barbecues and all of the stuff, that they start to realize that the 100 meg service or whatever it was that was the base entry level is no longer serving them. And, we talk a lot about MPS there, but it tanks their MPS. So, they come in thinking, oh, yeah, so and so just signed me up for service. I'm fantastically happy. But then as they start to use the service, it goes beyond that. And we talk a lot about that in GTM, about there's actually an economics law that was written to talk about supply and demand that has been co-opted and moved into broadband, because we see the same thing, is that if you give someone a 100 meg pipe or a 250 meg pipe, a lot of times there's going to be a good portion of those customers that will outstrip the demand with supply over a period of years. And so that idea of selling to the bottom, I think, is one that, customers, especially like customer service reps or member services reps, don't understand the long-term implications of, and how that can actually turn against us in terms of how customers feel about us. So
Yeah, I think it's a great
I have
point.
feelings. I have feelings, obviously. So.
Well, I know it's something you've had a lot of conversations about, Tara, with other broadband service providers, but it is something that we see a lot. And the CSRs, the member service reps, they're oftentimes one of the lower paid employees at the organization. So they're making that decision based on how they would decide, not
Yep, I
necessarily
definitely
how.
internalize it. Yeah.
100%, and I think that's natural, right? Many of us would do that, but it's flipping that around to say, actually, no, we're not providing them the best service by doing that. It's potentially putting this customer at risk and putting the company at risk, because churn in this industry is a really, really bad thing. We spend a lot of money and a lot of effort getting people in the door. We want to keep them. The other thing, so another topic I really wanted to make sure we hit on here, Scott, and this sort of aligns to what Tara was talking about the landing pages. And this is a term I feel like I've stolen from you, Tara, of the invitation matching the party, and making sure that as you're running ads, that when you get to the landing page, it actually still makes sense and kind of aligns with that ad. But the other piece of this, Scott, that I love that you did, and I want to talk about this in this story, is the calls to outcome that you have on your website, not calls to action. Zach and I have a visceral hatred for learn more. And you have changed that so that the buttons that are on the homepage when your people are getting to the landing page are a bit more specific around what the benefit is going to be to the customer. So can you talk us through that and kind of what changes you were able to make there?
Yeah. So also, I just realized I've got some more buttons to change on the website. But no. So we've, coming out of higher ed, love a learn more, right? It's all about learn more. But, I think for this, we wanted to do something that was more impactful. And honestly, it's just a lot more fun, right? When you love your office or keep it simple, it's just, I think it's a lot more fun and engaging than a click here or a buy now.
100%.
And so we also got a lot of guidance from Calix on that. And I probably should have said that at the beginning, but we got a lot of support from folks at Calix, from our support team throughout this whole process. They sat through a lot of discussions, a lot of meetings, and helped us, work on the site and even just get prepared to launch this. And so those buttons kind of came out of that. It was one of the things that came out of that was working through that stuff with y'all.
I remember sitting on a call with you. It was Haley, who was your success manager at the time, and you and I were sitting on the call, and we were kind of talking through this. Hey, how can we make these buttons a little bit more fun? And what I love about you is that you were just willing to you literally made the changes on the fly. We're sitting there on this mocked up page, and you're like, I'll just change it, and let's see what this looks like. And we oftentimes don't see a lot of folks who are willing to make those changes. It's like, I got to go ask 15 people, and make sure that, everybody agrees before I make it. You were just like, cool, sounds good. Let's do it. And I love the fact that you were just willing to get in there and move fast and break crap. Right. I love that. Love that aspect. It was super fun.
Well, the websites are important. And they are very important, but they're not stone tablets, right? I feel like, and if you've got analytics running on there, you can kind of tell, hey, let's change some stuff. Obviously, we weren't doing anything. We weren't overhauling the whole thing or doing anything that was really out there. Mm-hmm. And so we're just all right, well, we'll make some tweaks here and there and see how it goes. And if it works, it works. And if it doesn't, I've got an undo button. And
right?
So,
yes.
And I think that's the other thing, we one of the things that delayed our kind of getting into value-based offers, or delayed us getting into value-based offers, was we had to do a rebrand for both companies, and part of that, so unified logo system, new website, new web host, and so they did it through WordPress, and the guy who helped us with the website really designed a lot of it, ran it through WordPress, and with some plugins that make it super easy to make changes. And so that was a huge help. If we had tried to do that, a year earlier, I would have been able to just take notes and go, okay, yeah, we'll get this over to the dev team, mm-hmm. who's running our website, and in 3 to 6 business weeks, they'll get back to us and with changes, And so, that's one of the big things too, hopefully people who are thinking about doing this, you don't have to have WordPress. You don't have to have a super easy to update site, but it makes it a lot easier.
Well, yeah. And I just would like to say it louder for the people in the back that websites are not stone tablets. Scott, can we get t-shirts made and maybe give them out at marketing conferences? Because I feel like there's a little bit of, when we start talking about making changes, especially to stuff like that, there's so much hesitancy, and there's so much of perfect being the enemy of good, right? Everybody wants to decision it to death, or circulate it to death, and it's let's just throw some stuff out there and see how it works. And at web and digital ads are the perfect opportunity to try it. And to your point, if you've got analytics on your site, you're going to know within a couple of days whether or not those changes were, positive for you net, or whether you need to go back and hit the undo button. So
Well,
love that.
shifting focus here a little bit, I want to talk about the honeymoon period after launching these new plans. So that initial phase where you have that significant boost in visibility, engagement, everyone's happy here. Scott, you've had these new messaging tips and tricks out in your market for a while now. What's been the response? How's your customer satisfaction been impacted?
So it's been pretty good. Much to my disappointment, I can't just set it and forget it. So we're having to, I'm having to go back, and I'm happy to do it. It's something I should have been doing from the beginning, but just sort of regular training and touch points with our internal team. But the start was great. So typically we have two plans. Typically see 65% of people sign up for our lowest tier offering. The first 3 months after launching value-based offers, it was 50-50. And then it's kind of slowly slid back down close to where we were. So, I think, again, that's my responsibility, right? Like, so I think that's one of the big things that I'm reminding myself, like, right, you got to tell your team, you got to talk to people. You can't just keep moving on to the next project. Because this is a core piece of our business. And so it's going really well. I think the longer we do it, the more comfortable we get with it, the better it's going to be. So I think it's working well. And at this point, I don't know if we're going to necessarily change the packages around anymore. It seems to be making sense to people.
Yeah.
I was kind of waiting to see, how many people were going to call in and say, hey, I didn't see the family package on the sign up page when I went to check out, but so far it's working well.
One of the
Nice.
things you just said there, and this is something Gabe and Tara and I see all too often, but the movement of everyone buying your lowest tier to now more of that 50-50 split, I think that's a fantastic result.
Yeah. And I look at it in terms of another one of Gabe's favorite things is customer lifetime value. It is, like you said, broadband is a core part of your business. And while you don't need to make $1 million at it as a co-op, you still have responsibility for that line of business being, neutral, if not making some dollars, right? And at least paying for itself.
Well, I
And
guarantee you it costs more than $1 million to build said network. So we
I
might need to
know.
be making $1 million.
Okay. You see what I'm saying? Okay, maybe you don't need to
I
make
do.
$1 billion.
Yeah, there you go.
Like, I feel like Dr. Evil there, right? $1 billion. But it's the whole idea of how does it help sustain the business, and how does it help you be able to forecast and say, hey, if Tennessee regulations do change and we have the opportunity to build something in the future, we know that we've got the ability to do that because our subscriber base is providing enough revenue in order to do that kind of stuff. So
Yeah, it's a great point. The other bit that kind of comes around all of this is net promoter scores, or NPS. And Scott, this is something that I know we've talked about a little bit previously, but one of the things that we see a lot with providers like yourself who are launching new services into areas that have been woefully underserved before is people get real excited when you first come there, and everybody is so happy to see you. And so the net promoter scores end up being really, really high. However, then an outage happens, or their bill goes up a little bit, or some other negative experience happens, a couple of years down the road. And the other thing that we've seen is that providers who are launching new services, or in your case, even talking about those same services in a slightly different way, have a great opportunity to go back to those customers who have been on your service for a while. Hey, great news, we have this new service. And Tara, I know you've seen this too, but like when we have new services launch, all of a sudden that honeymoon period starts again. And people are like, oh yeah, it's like starting a new relationship again.
yeah. I'm a member of a co-op, right? I've been a member of a co-op my entire life. But it's we judge our service providers a lot of times on the quality of the last interaction. And if the last interaction was 10 plus years ago, then
Do I
absence
even
makes the heart
remember
grow
it?
fonder sometimes, but not in the case of NPS, right? Like it's what did you do for me last? And if it's been a really long time, then yeah, I'm not gonna think as highly of you because it's not as immediate for me in my brain. So
And Scott, could you talk to us just a little bit about? I know you had some concerns around, hey, we've got great NPS scores. Is this
yeah.
going to negatively impact the great scores that we have built?
Yeah, so right before we started really getting into kind of getting down the road with value-based offers, like right at the beginning, we did an NPS survey and it came back and we had a 90, which was incredible.
Yeah, it's
And
insanely
so
high.
then, and we were, as we were talking about this, we're seeing, oh, people are improving their NPS scores and they're going from 50s to 70s or 60s to 80s. And we thought, wow, that's amazing. And then we get a 90 back and now we're going, are we going to go from a 90 to a 50? Are we don't, what we don't want to do at this point is cause problems because everyone's really happy. And that was one of those factors in not changing the plans around and just changing the messaging around the plans. Because we wanted to make sure one of the things that people love is that it's super simple. You call up, you got two choices. They're both relatively affordable. They're both really good and reliable. Which one would you rather have? And so we didn't want to lose that simplicity. And so that was, again, one of the big factors. I think it also caused Haley a few extra meetings with us to go through, is this going to be okay? We've got, everyone's happy. Are they going to stay happy? But yeah, and we're still working to make things better. There's not necessarily tied to value-based offers, but we're starting to do proactive trouble calls now, where we're using Calix Engagement Cloud to reach out to folks who seem like they're having a bad experience to try to say, hey, can we jump ahead of that? Some of it is going to be, hey, you've hit your service limit a lot and you're on our lowest tier plan. Have you thought about upgrading? Also, you have 87 devices. You might want to upgrade. Things like that.
That's a few. Yeah.
You just described Zach's house. Let's just be honest.
And so we sort of look at that not necessarily as an upsell opportunity, just more as quality of service, making sure if there is really an issue, we want to be able to go out there and fix it.
100%.
But if it's really just, hey, you're really at the limit or over the limit of what your service tier can provide, we can have that conversation then too.
This whole conversation reminds me, and Zach, I'd be curious to hear your perspective on this. We talk a lot about, I love simplicity in packaging. I'm a big fan of that. Way too many times we see people with 7 or 8 packages on their website, and it just drives me absolutely up the wall. But there is also a personalization aspect of this. And Zach, I'd be curious to hear your perspectives because we talk about this a lot. That balance between simplicity, but also a personalized experience.
Yeah, Gabe, I think you're spot on there too. When you talk about simplicity, one of the things that used to / still does drive me crazy is when you go, in this case, to a broadband provider's website and you're faced with a dozen options. And when I say a dozen options, that's not an exaggeration in many of the cases we've seen. And kind of going back to the beginning of the podcast, when you have that situation, you might have, a 100, a 150, a 200, 250, megabit per second plan. My first question is always, how do you differentiate between these speeds? How are you differentiating between a 600 megabit per second and an 800 megabit per second plan? And with Gibson here and having these different marketing messages, I think, again, you've simplified your offering, but you've tailored it to a more personal approach too. So I really like that. One thing, as we were talking about the website, this crossed my mind, and I want to bring it up now. Gabe, I don't know if you noticed this, but I'm going to bring it up because it's on the Gibson website. And this is the best practice that Gabe and I had kind of geeked out on, 6 months ago at this point. But on your landing pages for each of your personas, so your family or your gamer and so on, one of the things you did, and I'm just pulling it up here as well, but you brought in a testimonial from, customers that match that specific persona. And what I like about this approach is, if you go back a dozen podcast episodes ago, there's a much different message when you say, oh, John Doe gave Gibson 5 stars. He loves our service. Well, what does that mean? Whereas the approach Gibson has here on your website, I love this. I'm on the family page. The testimonials talking about this mother of a family and how she uses your family plan with her kids and how it's impacted their life. that's such a more personal approach, because we always talk about, hey, bringing in testimonials is a great best practice. But now, you've taken that best practice into an amazing practice and personalize that. So I wanted to call that out too, as we talked about your website. Very nice way to bring in that personalization for each tier. If I go to the gamer plan as well, it's another customer testimonial who's talking about how your plan has impacted their gaming lifestyle. So absolutely love that, Scott.
Thanks. And that was one thing, so my background's in video production, and so I kind of assumed, oh, if we're going to do testimonials, I'm going to have to go out. It's going to be a whole thing for me to shoot these and get photos, and it's going to be weeks of work. What we ended up doing is just emailing people and then using AI to generate images. And so they're not supposed to look like those people necessarily, it's just sort of representative of, the family or a gamer or someone working from home. And that really cut the time down. So again, you talk about small marketing teams taking shortcuts that work. That was a big one for us. And I didn't have to spend 3 weeks driving all around, shooting video and editing things together.
That's awesome. I was going to say the work from home one looks a little bit like Gabe. So I love that approach.
I'm going to call out something else that you did with, you mentioned making your images out of AI, but the images that you have associated with each of your plans are low-key brilliant. And I really want us to talk about your simple and secure your base plan. I've seen this in a couple of other places, and we are laughing. Gabe's laughing right now because he knows where I'm going with this. But talking about what we were talking about earlier with not necessarily selling everybody to the lowest plan because it's not really what they need. We've seen a couple of companies, and yours is one, and a couple of other ones that have taken that low plan where, again, you're speaking to the people that want an internet, right? Or the people that are like, my kids said I have to have this internet in order to keep up with the, grandkids at their sporting events or whatever that is. And you've matched that image to that low plan. So in your case, it's this cute little grandpa with the kid on his lap in front of the computer doing the thing. And I love that because anecdotally, what we hear a lot is, well, I don't want the old people plan. And so it pushes people, just by virtue of the image that you've selected, to look at other plans and to see if they better align with some of those other offerings. And a lot of times that's going to be the better experience for them anyway. And so just even that tiny little picture change it can be huge. So
yeah. I wish I could take credit and say it was like a master stroke of marketing. It was more, we talked about it for, as you can imagine, a long time. Because that plan really fits a lot of different people, a lot of different groups of folks that we serve. And we just kind of landed on, we can't get all 4 different groups of people in one photo, so we'll go with this one. But yeah, that's what we try to do, is try to match at least some of the photography and stuff to the
invitation match the party, man. Yeah, it's a similar thing. And yeah, we've seen some customers actually take that a step further, because you're right. I mean, it's one of the other things we very commonly hear from our customers is, well, we have an older demographic. Okay, fair. So there's sort of 2 sets of people that really fall into that simple and secure, quote unquote, or baseline plan. It's primarily older folks who, aren't necessarily all excited about the blazing fast 1 gig internet speeds that, you're probably screaming at them about. And then there's also people who are starting out their lives who maybe, they're early in their careers, so they're not making as much money, and, and the price piece of it becomes a big consideration for them. So we've seen some BSPs actually creating 2 separate landing pages, one for that older demographic and one for that younger demographic, but still that's going to be really price conscious. So it is that balance. And I agree with you, Scott. You don't want, we don't, just like we were talking about a minute ago, you don't want 12, right? We need to make some hard decisions around, which ones are we actually going to go with here. But that is a way that we have seen some BSPs addressing that particular concern.
Well, Scott and Tara, thank you so much for joining us. Scott, if we could give one piece of advice to BSPs looking to make this transformation to a broadband experience provider, do some of these messaging tricks that you've done, what would you tell that BSP?
That's a great question.
Tara, you too. That goes for both of you.
Oh man.
While they're thinking about it, I'll just say, try crap, right? Like what Scott was talking about earlier.
Well, and
Yeah.
don't be afraid to iterate. I know that's one thing that we talk about a lot with customers, and especially, marketers who don't necessarily always have a really impactful or influential seat at the table in their larger organization, is that start with something small and get proof of concept, and then go back and say, okay, I got this, but now if I change this, I do you think that this would work? And then shop that around within your organization using some of the, the examples that you have. I feel like that idea of, again, I mentioned earlier, the perfect being the enemy of good, but I feel like so many of our marketers want to come out and have a fully fledged, completely built out, plan for everything, and they're going to set it and forget it. And it's like, the market doesn't allow for that. And so you got to come out with what you think is going to work, given the right, information and data you have, and then be okay with iterating after the fact.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I was just thinking of, like, was it the minimum viable product? What's the least amount of work you
MVP
have
it.
to do
Yes.
Yeah, there you
to
go.
get something out the door? That's probably honestly where I would start. It's just, if you can change your website easily, if you can, throw together a little flyer for your team, you're talking, I mean, I'm not sure exactly how long. It sort of depends on who hosts your website, right? But, potentially it's just a couple of weeks of kind of doing it on the side, and then you've got something that you can try out. And hopefully, also for folks who have marketers that are coming to them and saying, hey, can you let me try this? Like, give it a shot. I mean, the worst thing that's going to happen is you're going to get 6 weeks or 2-3 months down the road and go, hey, this isn't working. And well, you tried it, you probably not hurt anything. I don't think anyone's losing any brand loyalty over a web page that didn't convert. So
Like you said, Scott, you've got an undo button, man.
yeah, absolutely.
Real.
All right. Well, thank you again, Scott and Tara, for joining us today. And thank you, everyone, for tuning into Buffering. If you enjoyed this episode, please give us a follow on your favorite podcast app. And don't forget to share it with your friends and colleagues. And for more insights and updates, be sure to connect with Tara, Scott, Gabe, and I on LinkedIn.